Good afternoon, Grindstone Church. Today for devotions, we are in Psalm chapter 4 today. Psalm 4 fits how many of us are feeling in today's present time. It's very interesting because just like David in this psalm, many of us are stressed out, many of us are anxious, many of us really aren't sure how we're supposed to face the upcoming days ahead. In fact, for most of us, the future has never looked cloudier for most of us than it currently does right now. We've probably never really looked at the future in such and seen it as such a mysterious thing as we currently do right now. So our reading today in Psalm 4 can help us when we have this kind of outlook. And this is again a Psalm of David. This is a psalm that's a prayer that David brought to God in the late hours of the night. This is David rolling around praying to God very late at night, very early in the morning, because he simply can't sleep. So he pours out his heart to God and lets him know how he thinks, lets him know how he feels. And for some of us, when we're anxious, we can't sleep. Maybe that's something that you have going on in your life right now. You don't know what's coming ahead and you're not sleeping. You're just begged when you get up in the morning, and the thoughts that are in your head, they just keep going and going and going when you're trying to sleep at night. And then you're just waking up and you're thinking, what am I supposed to do? And so it's actually a wonderful opportunity to tell God what's on your mind and what's on your heart in this moment. And David shows us, even in the midst of this moment, which for most of us, we would kind of write off as a bit of a time that doesn't matter, or we just kind of write it off as stress. David shows us in Psalm 4 that this is actually a very important moment in which we can experience and meet the grace of God in this moment. Even when your mind is racing in the middle of the night, you can experience God's peace. So let's read Psalm 4 together so we see where God is going and where David is going with this whole thing. Answer me when I call to you, my righteous God. Give me relief from my distress. Have mercy on me and hear my prayer. How long will you people turn my glory into shame? How long will you love delusions and seek false gods? Know that the Lord has set apart his faithful servant for himself. The Lord hears when I call to him. Tremble and do not sin. When you are on your beds, search your hearts and be silent. Offer the sacrifices of the righteous and trust in the Lord. Many, Lord, are asking, who will bring us prosperity? Let the light of your face shine on us. Fill my heart with joy when their grain and new wine abound. In peace I will lie down and sleep. For you alone, Lord, make me dwell in safety. A wonderful psalm of assurance. This is a prayer that's being prayed in the middle of the night when he can't sleep. And so let's start at the end as we think about that. David ends after pouring out his heart to God by being able to sleep at night. So how can we get a peaceful sleep and even joy when other people are prospering, when other people are doing well? That's what all that new wine and grain talk is about. Well, David points us to something that's very personal. He points us to consider something you might not think about asking yourself in the middle of the night. So when we have an anxious heart, he tells us in verse 2 to consider this question from God that echoes directly into your heart and to your mind. And that question is this: how long will you people turn my glory into shame? How long will you love delusions and seek false gods. And you think, what a strange place to start. Why would God ask me that question? In the middle of the night when I'm so anxious, why wouldn't he just tell me something nice? What David's trying to do here, he's saying, in this moment of anxiety that you're having, you need to think about where your hope comes from. You need to think about what you're pursuing to the highest degree in your life, because it may have a connection to the highest degree of anxiety in your life. David encourages us to consider whether you have a divided heart, whether you're making success, or whether you're making relationships into idols. And if you do find yourself pursuing these things, if you are looking for fulfillment in anything that's not God, David shows us our need to repent. David shows us our need to turn to God and ask for forgiveness. What David's trying to get us to see is, he's trying to get you to see, maybe this is what's eating away at you. Maybe this is what's creating so much trouble in your life, these misplaced allegiances that only empty us and don't fill us in only the way that God can for us. Because God alone is the solution for our restless heart. It's not the relationships that we have, it's not the jobs, it's not the titles, it's not all these things that we place our trust in, it's not all these things that we place our hope in. It's only God alone who can do that for us. And so David's challenging us to ask ourselves a pretty pointed question in the middle of the night, but it's also a really necessary one. Or, as the psalm points out, you may need to consider whether you have a bitter heart. And then take that moment of groggy wakefulness and use it as a time to forgive that person who's harmed you. David reminds us to tremble and do not sin. And when you're on your bed, search your hearts and be silent. Now, one of the things that we ask ourselves every time we're in these devotions, when we're talking about the Psalms, is we want to say, well, what does this look like in real life? What does this look like for us living today? Well, it makes us think about this, and that forgiveness is an ongoing, often long-term work in the heart for us as believers. I've found this personally. Sometimes when I'm up late at night and you can't sleep, the thing that I'm asking myself is, what thoughts are leading me to think this way? What thoughts are leading me to be so anxious right now? Sometimes I got to think that through, and sometimes I know right away what it is that's causing me to be so anxious. It might have been a strange dream. It might have been something that happened to you in the middle of the day that just kind of knocked a memory loose, or knocked some kind of thing loose in our mind. And then for the rest of the day, you kind of kept replaying that memory over and over again in your head, right? Just the way that we all do. And then for whatever reason, that just totally influenced you and maybe even soured the rest of your day for you. You were like, man, I haven't thought about that in years. That was a strange or a weird memory. This happened to me the other day. I was just outside in the middle of the afternoon working on our garden. And this thought came into my head about just kind of a weird thing somebody said to me. It was like, I can't even remember if it was like 10 or 20 years ago. But I remember this thought and I was like, oh man, that's kind of a weird thing. I hadn't thought about that for a long time. And I kept going over and over and over it again in my head. And so what I needed to do was I needed to do what David shows us to do here. And that's to take a moment, and it's to pray to God. And it's essentially to get us and to show us that we need to align our heart with His. That's what we need to do, whether it's in the day or whether it's in the night, and we find ourselves being disturbed and becoming anxious by the thoughts that are in our head. It might be something just very simple and be very practical to say, God, I don't even know why this person has come to mind in my head, but if it's something that you want me to pay attention to, if that person needs help right now, I pray for that person. I just want to lift this person up to you, ask that you would help this person, that you would act in their lives. And if it's something that I'm totally aware of, and something where I need to keep forgiving that person, and maybe I haven't thought about it in a long time, just to hand it over to God, just to say, God, you know what, again, maybe it's a bad memory for something, I just want to hand it back to you. Just place forgiveness on this memory, on this person, and to just hand it over to you so that I can have forgiveness, so that I can have freedom in my life. And you know what, maybe if the memory reminded me, hey, you know what, maybe I've got some resentment here. Maybe I don't want to forgive this person. God, will you help me to turn the corner in this moment and to forgive this person? Simply because you've asked me to. Help me to forgive this person because I'm in the 70 times 7 line of activity of forgiving this person. Maybe I'm on moment 60. I just need to keep processing that forgiveness that may not be complete in my heart that I need to have for that other person. You know, this is God's way of showing us that forgiveness truly is the way to freedom. And this is the way that I want to live my life. I don't want to be hanging on to stuff begrudgingly because, you know, even when you get older, you have to be more disciplined with it. You have to keep working away at things that may be stuck in your head or stuck in your heart longer than you realized. And the other thing that this helps us to do is when we turn to God, we ask Him to help us to align our heart to His. It also rejects the things that don't help us. So it's a simple way to pray, you know, God, help me to not pursue the empty road of revenge fantasies. So help me to not remember, you know, those things in our head that we think about that we should have said after the fact, or the things that we should have done after the fact, and man, that really would have showed him, right? Well, that's not the way of forgiveness, right? And that never leads us to healing. It never leads us to forgiveness for that other person. And help me, God, to have a renewed mind. Help me to take my thoughts into submission to you, because I don't want to stagnate. I don't want to be stuck in neutral. I want to keep growing. I want to keep pursuing you, keep things out of my heart that get me tangled up. And I want, you know, for myself in my own mind to become better instead of becoming bitter over time. You know, it's interesting. That's a really powerful prayer. That's a really powerful discipline for you to do, to kind of stop yourself, so that even though your mind is really active and going, you're kind of putting the brakes on things and saying, you know what, God, you're in control over your world. And because you're over control over your world, you're also in control over what's going on in my mind. And I need to pump the brakes. I need to control what I can, and to stop and use this as a moment for you to, again, have control over this whole realm of me and my life and everything that's going on here. And it's interesting. David identifies two very real and personal places in our lives and our hearts that can get jammed up the most, right? We can get running after things that, at the end of the day, don't give us life, that only God can. And we can also have this corrosion, this effect that happens in our hearts when we don't practice forgiveness the way that we ought to for other people. It's a lot like, it reminds me a lot of when, you know, we have our boys, we have our kids here, and like say with, if you have a little kid and you hear them say something, or you hear them, or you see them do something, and as a parent you're kind of alarmed by that. You're thinking like, hey buddy, where did that come from? Or what made you think that? And you stop for a moment because you're concerned for how your kid thinks about things, for how your kid processes things in their hearts. And you just want to stop with them and say, hey, why did you say this? Or where are you going with this? Or, you know, you don't need to think that about yourself. Or you need to leave this and drop that. Or you need to embrace this over here and think about things this way because I care about how things are going on in your heart. And that's what God's doing here. He's basically getting us as his children to stop with him and to think about what we're thinking about and to think about what we're caring about. And he's doing this because he's a father to us and because he loves us, because he cares for us. He cares enough to stop us. And it doesn't matter if it's at 2 p.m., it doesn't matter if it's at 2 a.m. God is our Father, and he expresses that care even in unexpected moments that we can be having with him when we're talking to him in the middle of the night. So I hope that encourages you, even if it's a random moment completely in the middle of the night, in the middle of a sleepless night. This can be a place to have an appointment with God as you pour out your heart to him and seek to follow his leading. You know, David was referred to as a man after God's own heart, and he was called that for a reason. And today, if you find yourself in a place of anxiety, or if you find yourself in a place where you're kind of being pulled around by your thoughts, you too can be a man or a woman after God's own heart if you open yours to his leading during the day and during late at night when we're having our day and when we're having our evening prayers as well too. Well, my prayers are with you. If I can pray for you in any way possible, please know that I'm praying for you in the day. And hey, when I'm up at night, I'm praying for you as well in that moment as well too. I hope you guys have a great, great day.